My brother's daughter got drunk at a family meet and told everyone I was just the sad uncle who buys love. The crowd laughed, even her mom. I just left. A few days later, I did something that made them panic text me nonstop. I, 42M, never thought family gatherings would become something I dread, but the last one changed everything. For years, I'd been the dependable uncle, the guy everyone called when they needed something. Financial help, career advice, connections for job interviews. I showed up every single time without hesitation. My brother and his family lived comfortably enough, but whenever there was something extra they wanted, I was the first person they'd reach out to. His daughter had just turned 23, fresh out of college with a degree I'd helped fund through a hefty contribution toward her final year tuition when my brother hit a rough patch. The family reunion was at my parents' house, one of those quarterly gatherings where aunts, uncles, cousins, and their kids all crowded into the backyard for barbecue and beer. I'd arrived early to help set up, carrying 2 expensive bottles of wine and a check for my nephew's upcoming wedding. Another generous gift because that's what I did. The afternoon started pleasantly enough, with small talk and catching up, the usual rhythm of these events. I noticed my niece drinking more than usual, but she was an adult and I figured she could handle herself. Around evening, after most people had eaten and the crowd had loosened up with alcohol, someone suggested we go around sharing favorite family memories. It was one of those corny activities my mother loved, and we all indulged her. People shared stories about vacations, holidays, funny incidents from childhood. When it came to my niece's turn, she stood up with a wine glass in her hand, swaying slightly. Her mother, my sister-in-law, giggled and told her to sit down, but my niece waved her off. She started talking about how lucky she was to have family support, how grateful she felt for everything. I smiled, thinking she might actually say something nice for once. Then her tone shifted. She said that some people in the family were real supporters, while others just threw money around to feel important. She looked directly at me and said I was just the sad uncle who buys love because I didn't have a real family of my own. She said I probably kept a spreadsheet of everything I'd given everyone so I could feel superior. The words hung in the air for a moment, and then people started laughing. Not uncomfortable laughter, genuine amusement. My brother chuckled and shook his head like she'd made a clever observation. My sister-in-law laughed the hardest, covering her mouth but not hiding the entertainment in her eyes. A few cousins joined in. My mother looked uncomfortable but said nothing. My father seemed focused on his plate. I sat there feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach, my face hot with humiliation. My niece continued, emboldened by the response, saying something about how I probably reminded them of every gift at Thanksgiving like some kind of loan shark. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell or defend myself. I simply stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked to my car. Behind me, I heard my brother call out that I should lighten up, that it was just a joke. I didn't turn around. I drove home in complete silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. That night, I sat in my apartment, the same apartment they'd all mocked as being too empty for a man my age, and something fundamental shifted inside me. The next morning, I woke up with absolute clarity. I'd spent years being generous, thinking it meant I was building strong family bonds. But the truth was simpler and uglier. They saw me as an ATM with legs, someone whose feelings didn't matter as long as the money kept flowing. I opened my laptop and started making changes. First, I called my nephew and told him I needed to rescind my wedding gift check due to unexpected financial circumstances. He sounded disappointed, but said he understood. I could hear the judgment in his voice, like I was being petty. Then I went through my finances systematically. My brother had been listed as a beneficiary on one of my investment accounts, something I'd set up years ago when I thought family legacy mattered. I removed him and designated a charity instead. I called my financial advisor and restructured my will, removing every family member except my parents and distributing the rest to organizations I actually believed in. I canceled the standing offer I'd made to help fund my younger cousin's medical school, an offer I'd made just 2 months earlier at another gathering. But I didn't stop there. My brother's business had been struggling, and I'd been quietly planning to invest a significant amount to help him expand. I'd already had preliminary meetings with my accountant about it. I canceled those plans entirely and instead invested that money in a competitor's venture in the same industry. I didn't do it maliciously. The competitor simply had a better business model, but I knew it would sting when my brother eventually found out. The most significant change involved my niece directly. She'd been accepted into a graduate program and had asked me months ago if I'd help with expenses since my brother couldn't afford it on his own. I'd agreed, promising to cover a substantial portion. I sent her an email, professional and brief, explaining that I'd reconsidered and wouldn't be able to provide financial support for her education. I wished her well and suggested she explore student loans and scholarships like most people did. For 3 days, my phone stayed silent. I went to work, hit the gym, met friends for dinner, and enjoyed the peace. On the 4th day, the messages started. My brother texted asking if we could talk, saying there might have been a misunderstanding at the reunion. I didn't respond. My sister-in-law called twice and left voicemails saying my niece had been drunk and didn't mean anything by it, that I was being too sensitive. I deleted them without finishing. Then my niece herself sent a long text message. She apologized for her comments, said the alcohol had made her say stupid things she didn't believe. She mentioned how stressed she'd been about graduate school and how much she'd been counting on my help. She said she'd already turned down other opportunities because she thought my support was guaranteed. The message ended with her saying she hoped I could forgive her and that family was supposed to stick together through mistakes. I read it twice and felt nothing. I typed back a simple response. I accepted her apology, but my decision about graduate school funding remained unchanged. I suggested she speak with the financial aid office about her options. She responded immediately, asking if we could at least meet to discuss it. I said no. That's when the panic really set in on their end. My brother called and actually left an angry voicemail saying I was punishing his daughter for one drunken comment, that I was being cruel and petty. He said family meant forgiving mistakes, not holding grudges. He brought up everything he'd ever done for me, which, when I really thought about it, amounted to showing up to my apartment once to help me move furniture and giving me career advice when I was starting out 20 years ago. My mother called next, her voice careful and diplomatic. She said she understood I was hurt, but she hoped I wouldn't let one incident damage decades of family relationships. She reminded me that I'd always been the bigger person, the one who rose above conflicts. She didn't explicitly ask me to restore my financial commitments, but the implication was clear. I told her I loved her and would always be there for her and Dad, but my relationship with my brother's family had changed permanently. She sighed and said she hoped I'd reconsider. The messages kept coming. My sister-in-law sent a lengthy email explaining how difficult things had been for them lately, how much they'd been depending on my help with various plans. She listed specific ways my withdrawal of support would impact them. The graduate school situation, the business expansion my brother had already started preliminary work on, the general safety net they'd felt having me available. She said she'd always appreciated me and considered me a real brother, not just an in-law. She asked what it would take to make things right. I finally responded to my brother directly. I told him I wasn't punishing anyone. I was simply reassessing how I allocated my resources. I explained that his daughter's comments, and the family's reaction to them, had made me realize I'd been enabling a dynamic where my value was measured entirely by my financial contributions. I said I was choosing to invest my time and money in relationships where I felt genuinely valued as a person, not just as a source of funds. I wished him well with his business and told him I had faith he'd figure it out on his own. His response came within minutes. He said I was being ridiculous, that everyone knew I was valued for more than money. He brought up childhood memories, times we'd spent together, inside jokes from decades ago. He said his daughter had made one mistake and didn't deserve to have her future derailed because of it. He accused me of being vindictive and small. He said our parents would be ashamed of how I was acting. That last part made me laugh out loud, a bitter sound in my quiet apartment. Our parents had watched their granddaughter mock me and said nothing. They'd heard their son and daughter-in-law laugh along and hadn't defended me. They'd called only after the money dried up, not to check if I was okay emotionally, but to smooth things over so the financial pipeline could resume. The hypocrisy was almost beautiful in its completeness. I blocked my brother's number after that. I muted the family group chat where messages were now flying constantly, with various relatives weighing in about forgiveness and family values. A few cousins reached out privately, the ones who'd never asked me for anything, and expressed sympathy. One told me she'd found my niece's comment cruel even in the moment, but hadn't wanted to cause drama by saying anything. I appreciated her honesty even if it didn't change anything. My niece tried a different approach after a week. She sent another message saying she'd talked to a therapist and realized she'd been projecting her own insecurities onto me. She said she'd always felt inadequate compared to my success and had lashed out in a moment of weakness. She acknowledged that her mother and father had enabled her behavior by laughing instead of correcting her. She said she took full responsibility and understood if I never wanted to speak to her again, but she hoped eventually we could rebuild some kind of relationship. She specifically said she wasn't asking for money anymore. She'd figured out her graduate school funding through loans and a part-time job. She just wanted me to know she was genuinely sorry. This message was different. It felt more authentic, less calculated, but I still didn't trust it. I responded briefly, thanking her for the apology and saying I needed more time. I meant it. Maybe years down the road, after she'd proven through actions rather than words that she'd changed, we could have some kind of relationship. But not now. The wound was too fresh. My brother's business expansion fell through without my investment. I heard through the family grapevine that he'd had to scale back his plans significantly and was bitter about it. My sister-in-law stopped reaching out after I didn't respond to her third email. The family gatherings continued without me. I declined every invitation politely but firmly. My parents were disappointed but eventually stopped pushing. The interesting thing was how much lighter I felt. I'd been carrying the weight of everyone's expectations for so long that I hadn't realized how heavy it had become. Without the constant requests for help, the unspoken obligation to be everyone's safety net, I had more energy for my own life. I started dating seriously for the first time in years. I took a vacation I'd been postponing because family obligations always seemed to take priority. I donated to causes I cared about without feeling guilty that I wasn't directing that money toward relatives instead. 3 months after the incident, I ran into my niece at a coffee shop. She was with friends, and we made eye contact across the room. She looked like she wanted to come over, but I gave her a polite nod and turned back to my laptop. I wasn't ready for a conversation, and she seemed to understand that. She texted me later saying it was good to see me and she hoped I was doing well. I thanked her and left it at that. My brother sent me a birthday card, something he hadn't done in probably a decade. Inside was a brief note saying he missed me and hoped we could talk someday. No mention of money or help or any of the drama. Just that simple statement. I kept the card but didn't respond. Maybe someday I would. Maybe not. The point was that it was now my choice, made on my timeline, based on what I wanted rather than what was expected of me. The panic texting eventually stopped. People moved on to other dramas, other concerns. Life continued for everyone. But something fundamental had shifted in how I viewed family and obligation and love. I'd learned that generosity without boundaries isn't virtue. It's just a way to avoid confronting difficult truths about relationships. I'd learned that being needed and being valued are completely different things. And I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who only love what you can do for them. I still help people. I'm not a different person fundamentally. But now I choose carefully, and I pay attention to whether my help is appreciated or simply expected. I've built stronger friendships with people who knew me before I had money, who stuck around during the lean years, who check on me when I'm quiet not because they need something, but because they actually care. Those relationships fill the space my family used to occupy, and they're healthier for everyone involved. Looking back on that humiliating moment at the reunion, my niece's mocking words, the crowd's laughter, the casual cruelty disguised as humor, I can almost feel grateful for it. It was brutal, but it was also clarifying. It stripped away all the pleasant illusions I'd been maintaining about why people wanted me around. And once I saw the truth clearly, I couldn't unsee it. More importantly, I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop enabling dysfunction, even when that dysfunction involves people you love. Especially when it involves people you love. Because real love doesn't require you to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. Real love doesn't laugh when you're hurt. Real love doesn't panic when the money stops flowing. It reaches out to see if you're okay. I don't know if my family will ever really understand what changed that day. I don't know if they'll ever see their behavior as anything other than me being overly sensitive. But that's not my problem anymore. I've built a life that feels authentic and chosen rather than obligated and exhausting. And if that makes me the sad uncle who stopped buying love, I can live with that label just fine. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot to us.